Disney Plus brings together fans of all ages. This podcast brings three adults who are also kids at heart together to talk about Disney Plus. Join Scott, the Magic Genie producer, Regina, the sassy Megara of the group, and Nathan, the gentle but grumpy Brit, as they bring you news, reviews, special guests, and discussions on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Disney Plus Streamcast. I'm Scott Murray, and I'm here with Regina Davis.
Hello, hello.
Well, I know that we had planned to do this episode a couple of weeks ago, but some things came up on my side of the world that were family-related that just prevented me from being able to record, but we are back today with the show we had planned. We're going to be talking to Lou Mongello a little bit later today. We're going to be talking to him about some of the rides inspired by pop culture and movies at the theme parks. And I know that one of the great reasons to have that conversation right now is because me and I know so many other people are missing being able to not just go to the parks, go anywhere right now. In fact,
but if I could go to the parks, I would.
Yeah. Well, in fact, Regina, I wanted to ask you today, the virus is going to take a break tomorrow, and so everybody can get out and do something normal for one day. Where would you go?
Just zero consequences.
Zero
24
consequences.
Hours.
Yeah.
COVID purge. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. You know, weirdly, I would probably do something like go bowling. Something that I'd been putting off. Instead of necessarily going to sort of relive something I haven't experienced in a while, like going to a restaurant. I think it would be one of those activities where, you know, every time I would drive by the bowling alley, I'd be like, oh, man, I really need to go. And now that I've been cooped up in my house, I need to stop putting stuff off like that, because going bowling is not a big ask. You know what I mean? I can set aside, you know, a little bit of a paycheck to go bowling. So I think if I had 24 hours, that's what I would do.
Funny you should say that, because my wife and I are actually in a bowling league. And we've been
What's your bowling team name?
Oh, we change it every year. For a while, it was the Wesley Crushers.
Yes! I love it. Thank you.
And we've been bowling with the same people on our team for quite a while, too, and we miss it. I think if it landed on a Friday, I think that's something we both would say we'd want to do, because we miss all the camaraderie that comes with not only our teammates, but the rest of the people there. It's weird to be out of that routine.
Yeah,
so
and that
I get it.
It's just kind of fun.
So I know that we have been unable to record for the last couple of weeks, but nonetheless, we are here to do our normal show, our regular show, virus or not. So if we're going to follow our usual format, before we talk to Lou Mongello, we have to discuss news, or at least see if there's some news out there. And how do we do that today, Regina?
That means it's time for News with Nathan.
Hello, Scott. Hello, Regina. How are you guys doing?
So much better now that we're all three together again. I love you, Scott.
Indeed.
I love you, Nathan. This is the best.
Love you too, and love our listeners.
Not as much as I love my theme music. Thanks for that, by the way. I feel like Hulk Hogan every time you introduce me. That's brilliant. I am a real American. I love it. Yay. And I just get so hyped. You know what else I'm hyped? I'm super hyped because today we're recording on a Sunday, May the 3rd. So just around the corner. You know what it is? It's May the 10th. American Mother's Day. And that's when ABC is going to be showing Disney Family Sing-Along Volume 2. That's right, you fools. You couldn't get enough of the first one. 10 million viewers in there with a gut punch to the feels, all those celebrities on a sing-song in front of their tellies. And you were joining in too, weren't you, you loons? Anyway, you can do it all again next week. And they've got Chloe and Halle, they've got Billy Eichner, you like him, Halsey, Josh Gad, Childish Gambino, yes please, Miguel, Seth Rogen, Rebel Wilson, and my favorite, Shakira. Yes, it's going to be really, really good. Sunday's a busy day for TV for me, but It's there. The original one, if you missed out, is on Disney Plus, coincidentally enough, streaming now. So go check it out. And if you're up for it, go ahead and engage. While you're being engaged in these challenging times, you should know if you need face masks, shop Disney.com. They're selling their own face masks now, and they probably look better than the ones you're buying down the road. It's 4 for $20 in various different sizes. They've got Mickey-themed ones. They've got Pixar, bunch of Star Wars ones. They're donating 1 million masks to underserved communities, and they're giving away the first $1 million worth of profit from those masks as well. So, fair play, Disney.
That's the good news. Is that they're donating that money, and I guess that's one reason that you could buy them now. The trick is, depending on where you live and how quickly you need them or want them, is another thing. Because if I remember right, these things aren't even going to get shipped to you for a few weeks, right?
Well, you're absolutely right. Not until June or July. But look at it this way. Worst case scenario, you're glad to have the masks. And because you're not going to Fan Expo, Comic-Con, or any of those things this year, you can represent and let your dork flag fly nice and proudly by having an R2-D2 or the child on the face of your mask. That's great. Worst case scenario, it goes in the drawer like your Tamagotchi from back in the day, and whenever you're having a root around and clearing out your trash later on, your kids say, "Oh, Dad, what's that? What's this silly face mask?" "Oh, no, let me tell you of the pandemic of 2020. Dum, dum, dum." So, it's whether it's a piece of apocrypha from back in the day or whether it's, a daily driver, as it were, you could spend $20 on 2 terrible sandwiches, but this way you get 4 quite nice masks.
It's probably still a better idea than making one out of boxers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently there's a video of some women making some out of their husband's boxers.
Yeah, I saw one where people were making them out of like Victoria's Secret pants, like thongs and stuff, although you'd have to feel there wasn't enough material there to actually do the job. Still, moving on. In other COVID news, Abigail Disney completely ripped Disney this week for paying a $1.5 billion dividend to their shareholders while furloughing so many people. 25 tweets she sent about it, Abigail Disney being the granddaughter of Roy Disney. That's Walt's brother, who he made the Walt Disney Company with. That's insane. You can go and read that screed on there. She's always been pretty, what can I say?
Vocal.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. And yeah, she lets those execs have it. Talking of execs, Nancy Cantor has announced her resignation, and she's leaving in January next year. Nancy Cantor is the executive vice president of Disney Channels Worldwide. That's important because she's brought so many shows to those networks. Like she made, the Disney Junior thing like a really big deal. That was a revenue stream, if you will, that they didn't have before the same way. So Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that was her deal. Doc McStuffins, that's hers. Sophia the First and Elena of Avalor, those are hers. Something that she's making that or came out under her watch or is in development under her watch, which I'm excited for, is Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, the Marvel strip. It's getting a comic, getting a cartoon, so I'm super excited for that. Anyway, that's a really, really big deal. She's got plenty of time to leave, I guess, plans for her successors and so on and so on. That's kind of interesting as well, given that Disney Channel is actually closed a bunch of their channels in various markets around the world, allegedly due to Disney Plus, the oversaturation of content and people not wanting to advertise on those. So, for example, Italy has lost its Disney Channel. A bunch of the Disney XDs have gone all around Europe. Australia lost its Disney Channel, for example. And they're blaming that on the 50 million subscribers now to Disney Plus worldwide. Other news, Hercules is getting a live-action remake produced by the Russos, would you believe, written by David Callahan, who's the guy writing Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So that's exciting because, Hades, one of the best Disney villains of all time. In other upcoming movie things, Spidey, Homecoming 3, if you will, has had its date pushed back to November 5th, 2021. And in turn, because it's an MCU movie, it means that Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, has then been pushed back to March 25th, 2022.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that happened. And because that happened, they brought Taika Waititi's new Thor movie up a week. So that's going to open the week before Valentine's Day in 2022 as well. So we've got a while to wait for some of that stuff, but it's still coming. That's down the pipe. Just push back a little more. And then, you indulged me my bait and switch earlier, and I appreciate it. May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day. And as a result, there's a whole bunch of new content about on Disney Plus for that. The big thing is that I guess they're giving the whole titles, the carousel menu, a bit of a makeover and showing a bunch of different concept art that they commissioned or pulled out of the archives for all the different movies. So if you go to look at Last Jedi, if you go to look at Return of the Jedi, there has all these like the new splash screens. The Ralph McQuarrie art, I think, is the title art for May the 4th right now. Rise of Skywalker, the Disney Gallery series that's on there. 8-part documentary behind the scenes of The Mandalorian. New part every week. That's exciting. We like that. In other Mandalorian news, Season 2 already in the can. Season 3 confirmed to be being written right now by Jon Favreau.
Yes.
And they've already started the pre-production for it. Apparently there's a long lead time on that because they want to get it just right. I did notice there's a whole bunch of really cool Mando toys coming out. I did notice, for me, there's a couple of bits on there that I was super psyched about because I like my Funko Pops. One of them is the TV moment Funko, which is like kind of a vignette. And it's the Mandalorian with the child in the pram floating next to him, walking along like that sort of the rocky exterior. That's coming out. Moff Gideon with the Darksaber gets his own.
I saw that.
Yes.
Was great.
That's a cool one. That's a cool one. There's also a bunch of different child pops coming. There's one where he's drinking his soup. There's one where he's eating the frog. There's an exclusive one to Walmart where he's closing his eyes and he's wielding the Force. And there's just a regular plain Jane one that Target have where he's just not doing anything. That's the one to skip. It's an exclusive, but it's really not that impressive. So, And the other the other Star Wars news that I saw this week is there's a new series coming for Disney Plus done by Leslie Headland, who's the showrunner and the executive producer of Russian Doll Netflix. Mm-hmm. She's doing a new Star Wars show which has a female-centric plot line. We don't know what it means. But it's been confirmed by Variety. And that's coming out in the not-too-distant future as well. And guys, I hope that makes your quarantining, or not, as the case may be, wherever you are, a little bit more manageable in these interesting times.
Great news.
You were talking about Star Wars stuff to get. And I know that, with the popularity of The Mandalorian, it's obviously been a big deal to go out there and try to find shirts and merchandise. And sometimes I've noticed that people, they see The Mandalorian and the child everywhere, but there's other characters they love that they're having trouble finding. If you're one of those people, it just so happens that this past weekend, I decided to hop on Zazzle, which I think I talked about Zazzle back when we were discussing Clone Wars, because that's where years ago, before Ahsoka was what she is now, I made an Ahsoka Tano shirt, which I wore so much, I had to throw it away before it just really started to look less like a shirt. And it turns out they have a lot of properties there that you can build your own T-shirts and stuff, not only Star Wars, but also Marvel. But I happened to go into the Star Wars section on Zazzle, where you can create shirts and write things on them and, coffee mugs and any number of other things. And they have a section completely dedicated to The Mandalorian and completely dedicated to the current season of Clone Wars. There's stuff in there with Ahsoka. There's stuff regarding the Clone Squad with her colors. There's stuff there. I also noticed that the Mandalorian has stuff with not only the child in The Mandalorian, but also Cara Dune. And even the Armorer has some stuff, if you're a big fan of her, and I know a lot of people are,
Me.
rightfully so. So there's some shirts and stuff you can make with her on them. So I would tell people to go check out some of the things you can create on Zazzle if you're a fan of Clone Wars or Mandalorian, because I'd be willing to bet there's some stuff there that you haven't seen other places. And, like I said, sometimes they give you the opportunity to go in and add stuff to it and write things and any number of other options when they give you the chance to edit and create your own merchandise. So go check that out. There's also other properties there, but since this is a Disney show, I'll say including Star Wars and Marvel and Disney, by the way. All right, well, I think we've all had our share of talk about what we can't do or places we can't go right now, including the Disney parks. But the one thing, fortunately, that COVID-19 can't keep us from doing is talking about it and talking about how much we love it and how we miss it and get to reminisce a little bit about it, kind of, maybe from an imagination standpoint, teleport ourselves there if we get to talk about it a little bit. So we are going to talk about the Disney parks and their ties to pop culture with Lou Mongello.
That's next on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
So I believe the first time I heard Lou Mongello speak, it was at a podcast conference, and I just remember hearing his amazing story about how he's getting to do what he does today. And of course, back then it was even earlier in the process, but he's been pursuing his passion of Disneyworld through content and speaking engagements and several other things, I would say since about 2005. And that was after, in the early 2000s, living in New Jersey as an attorney and deciding to write a book about his passion for Disney World, which, gained a little success. And that's actually what inspired, hey, if I could write a book and get some traction, I wonder what else I could do. And he took that leap of faith. If you're somebody who's thinking about maybe turning your passion into a career, I think Lou is a great example of what might be possible, but you still got to be willing to take that risk. Because he left that firm, that law firm, packed up the entire family, left New Jersey, moved to Florida with the idea of, okay, well, I've left everything behind, the stability, the income, the career I had there to try to see if I can make one here about something I love. And here we are. I mean, all you have to do is visit LouMongello.com or Walt Disney World Radio, WDW Radio, which is also the podcast. It has gone far and beyond, I know, what he expected. And if you have any passion for Disney, especially the parks, and not only that, we've all been able to take that jump with him because he provides such fantastic content. And he's a great guy to meet and talk to, as well as many of his listeners will tell you, because he's been able to meet so many of them over the years. And with all that going on, we're so excited that he was able to join us today on the Disney Plus Streamcast and talk about some of the pop culture references that go into the attractions and rides at the parks. Hi, Lou. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, we're glad to have you here. And obviously, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, I know with all of us being not only big Disney fans, but Disney park fans, it probably not that long ago would have been hard to imagine any scenario where Disney World wouldn't be open, because that was one of the things that, we love about the parks and they're kind of known for, is outside of a couple of days of the year, they are always open. And I have to assume, considering how much of a big part of your life the parks are and that whole sphere, that this has got to be a really weird time for you as well, considering that that's actually happening today.
Yeah, these are strange days indeed for everybody, just in everyday life. And like you said, I don't think anybody could ever sort of fathom a scenario where Walt Disney World is closed, right? Like the moose out front should have told you, like Wally World, like it's closed.
That's right.
And other than an occasional hurricane, here and there, it's just something that doesn't happen. And I think for a lot of us, especially who are locals, that was a very emotionally impactful moment. I mean, I am the first to admit that as it was happening, I was having a tough time keeping it together, because it is our escape. It's this constant safe place that we can go to. And then when it closes, I think it really, it means something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know that's the way my wife and I look at it. I mean, people ask why we, try to go as often as we do. It's like, gosh, you've been there. Why do you keep going back? And it's because exactly what you just said. It's an escape. It's a safe place. It's just one of those places that every time we pass through, that sign on the road that says you're entering the, Walt Disney World, you feel like, I've gotten away. That's really how it feels for us. And I remember seeing those videos too, on the last day before they were going to shut down. They always have the cast members come out and wave at everybody. And it was just weird for all those people to be thinking, yeah, this is going to be goodbye for a while. Oh. And that was emotional too.
Those were so hard to watch. And I'm not even someone who's able to make it out to the parks as often as, many of my peers, but it was still just very surreal to see it all shut down.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I've been there when the park closed because it was at capacity. They couldn't let anybody else in. That's kind of one of the only other times it would close. But I'm trying to have some hope, Lou, as I watch some of the news here from Texas as to what's going on in Florida. And I think within a week, I saw one report that said Disney, wasn't real sure when they could do something, and when they do, it was going to be these radical changes, everything from people having to sign waivers to any number of other things. And then within, I think, the same week, I saw the report come out where the local government had given them guidelines for how they could do it, which basically broke down from cast members having to sanitize things on a regular basis, only 25% capacity in phase 1, people wearing masks, and then social distancing in places that involved lines. But there's still a question as to when they might even be comfortable going that far. I mean, do you have a gut feeling as to when they think they might be able to pull something like that off and go through those 3 phases?
Yeah, so to be clear, a couple things. Like, one, I know nothing.
Right, so, yeah, I'm sure none of us do.
I don't know anything in terms of Disney, and look, I live in Florida. I live right behind Magic Kingdom, so the guidelines that came out from the governor specific to Florida and Orange County are ones that are only to a certain degree, I think, applicable to Walt Disney World, because yes, right now it's in phase 1, 25% capacity in restaurants and in retail with social distancing inside and tables being X amount of feet apart. It's hard to try and wrap that into the theme park experience and a crowded queue and theaters and restaurants. And I mean, it's overwhelming when I start to try and think about everything that Disney needs to think about, from who they allow in, how many, how far do you keep them apart in queues and attractions. And it's hard to almost fathom how to go about executing it in a way that is completely safe for not just guests, but for the cast members as well.
One of the things I got to thinking is just how the attractions and the rides have evolved over the years, especially the ones that are tied to the movies, and what that experience has evolved in the last few years of just being able to do something as simple as ride something that's themed that way to today's experience where it's like, oh no, it's not just that. You now need to feel like you're living there or actually walking around that world. And of course now we also have, it's not just movies turning into rides. Now we have rides turning into movies. But I wanted to talk about some of those early ones and why those were so special, and maybe some of those first rides maybe you remember. I think some of the theme rides that were around in the early days where you're thinking like the Dumbo ride and the Mad Tea Party and Peter Pan's Flight, Snow White's Scary Adventures, the Swiss Family Treehouse, and even the Haunted Mansion was opened there early on. And it's amazing just how much, just over the years, that is still a very popular attraction from those early days.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think even as, like you said, as rides turn into attractions are turning into, attractions turn into movies and vice versa. I think it all really does go back to, what Walt wanted, especially in Fantasyland and Disneyland, was this idea for allowing us as moviegoers to be able to step foot in these 3-dimensional, not just portrayals of the movies on screen, but we wanted to become active participants. And as time has gone on and generations continue to want less passive experiences and almost want to be, sort of the protagonist in their own, it's like a choose your own adventure, right? That's what we want to do now when we go on attractions. But it's interesting to see the evolution of the theme park experience.
And there really haven't been too many things that have gone away. I mean, obviously there's some things that got outdated enough where they were either enhanced or just changed. But what's really kind of great, one of the many great things I think about the park is no matter what age you are, if you visited the park for the first time when you were a kid, there's still probably attractions you still absolutely have to do when you go back as an adult. What are some of those rides for you?
I mean, look, the classics are classics for a reason, right? Look, go to Magic Kingdom on any day, and what are going to be the attractions that have some of the longest queues? Peter Pan's Flight, a ride that really has not changed in nearly 50 years. Same thing for the Haunted Mansion, save for that, small little upgrade a number of years ago. Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, these are all sort of, early. Obviously, Pirates wasn't an opening day attraction, but just a couple of years after the park opened. It's a wonderful marriage of familiarity and sentiment and nostalgia and the emotional connections that I think we have that makes those, like for me, those are, I live here, I go relatively often, but those are the ones that I go back to, right? I love Rise of Resistance and Flight of Passage, but if you ask me when the park's open, where am I going to go first? It's going to be Magic Kingdom because I want to have those connections to the attractions that I've loved for literally decades.
Oh gosh, I've never been to the parks. I hate to say it, I'm such a fan of pop culture. It almost sickens me to say it, but I've never made it out there. And I think part of that is we've said this on the podcast recently. For some people, Disney, a trip to Disney is like the excursion of a lifetime. And you see all these different videos and all these different things. Oh, if you go, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. And so I feel like there's this, I guess, this sort of feeling that you have to like hit all this stuff in one go, but then you hear about all the stuff that's coming out next, whether it's the Halcyon, the Star Wars cruise liner or type thing, or whether it's the Avengers campus. You're like, oh no, I have to do it again next year as well. Like, I may as well just start selling plasma now and, kind of putting that into my Disney fund, because they got you on the hook again and again and again. So as a hypothetical, though, Lou, being that you're there and asking for a friend, I guess, if you were a 40-something male who wanted to go to the parks and the kids were like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, we'll go. Would you say you should go for a long time and see everything, or would you say you should go and hit the big things out the way with them first, then go back secretly by yourself second, and kind of, save yourself some money or some grief in the time? Say just asking for a friend. Kids, don't read anything into this. Dad's not going to Disney without you right now.
So I love the fact that you were like, well, and if I decided to go back secretly on my own, because I think every mom and dad has sort of quietly thought that, like, yes, I want to go and do all these magical things with my young kids and have to go back and nap in the middle of the day. But they also secretly want to go and, ride Rise of the Resistance over and over again and do some other things that you can't do with your kids. And look, the problem now with 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, and Disney Springs, which for all intents and purposes is almost a 5th theme park, it's, dare I say, impossible to quote unquote do it all, right? To do it all and to say that you've ticked everything off the box. Prioritizing what you do and when is sometimes part of the fun, like the planning for your trip. That your trip begins when you start planning at home, right? Okay, what's our days going to look like? And I'm sure a lot of us have gone through the laying it all out on a very complicated, color-coded, Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Right? 10:03, we get online here. 10:47, we grab something to eat. But I think that's also part of the fun too, is doing as much as you can, but then it almost sort of whetting your appetite to come back. Yeah. Repeat the favorites and then see the things you weren't able to do.
Yeah, it's almost like what you got to do when you go to a big comic convention. I mean,
yes.
you look at all the sessions and you can't possibly see everything. And you like Lou said, you got to prioritize. But then that convention's going to be there next year. So maybe you get lucky enough to go back and do see some of the things you didn't get to see the first time. We used to be able to tell people when people asked us, if you want to try to fit everything in, especially something at all three parks, try to go for like a week. At least at Disney World. Disneyland's a little different, but Disney World definitely try a week. But now, like you said, there's just, if you want to see everything, including the other parks, and yeah, Disney Springs, holy crap. Downtown Disney used to be just kind of like this one little strip of places from one end to the other, not including Pleasure Island and things like that. But now, I think that's a really good way to put it. It's its own entity that deserves almost its own day now. With as many things as they've added, everything from all the new restaurants and special stores to the Void, it really is a whole another experience. But, you guys were talking about, Nathan, you were bringing up the point about, things constantly getting added. But Lou, I wanted to ask you, too, what you think about some of the things that have stayed, but they've changed into something else recently, and what you thought about those. Because I remember some of those early days of going to Disney, like at Epcot, back when they had the sea base thing that you could go to where, you felt like you were going underwater. You'd get in this elevator and they would take you into the sea base where you would see all the sea life, and that's now evolved into a Nemo-themed attraction. And then, of course, we all think about how they've taken one of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terrors and now made that Guardians of the Galaxy themed. What have you thought about some of these rides that have managed to kind of keep the fundamentals the same, but they've maybe evolved into things that are more pop culture oriented? It's this balance that we sort of struggle with. Again, having sort of one foot sort of rooted in the past while always using, moving forward. Walt said himself that the parks are not meant to be a museum. It's meant to be a living, breathing, evolving thing. And, when things close now, the internet, Twitter, I'm talking to you, collectively loses its marbles, right? Like, oh my God, Walt is turning over in his grave. People forget that when Mr. Toad's Wild Ride closed in the late 90s, people had toad-ins. They literally sat down in front of Mr. Toad, like protesting the closure of the attraction. But people also forget that, at the time, it was not the most popular. Horizons, I'm talking to you, right? All the Horizons fans, forget the reason why you could always get on Horizons was because there was never a line for Horizons, right? Because people just didn't love it. It's the ex-girlfriend effect, right? We don't miss your girlfriend until she breaks up and you're like, no, please come back. I promise. I'll love you. I'll go visit you every single day. So, whether it's Adventurers Club or Horizons, or the Seas with Nemo. Look, I loved the hydrolators and the original attraction, and it rained, the deluge. But by the same token, it was not necessarily one that kids at home are going, oh, Mom, Dad, can we go back to Disney World because I need to go ride the hydrolators? But when you change it to Nemo, and when you get rid of the oil derricks and the trolls and the grizzly, the polar bear, and make it a Frozen themed ride, now all of a sudden kids want to go. And Maelstrom, when it closed, was very interesting to just sort of sit back and watch all that happen. People, losing their marbles. I said, well, seriously, when was the last time you went to Epcot and at Rope Drop ran to Maelstrom or stood online to see the oil rigs? I mean, they weren't. But I think, look, with Frozen and Ratatouille and now Guardians coming, I still think that there is Epcot keeping its foot sort of in the past, and I think we'll see more of that nostalgia coming back soon, but also creating guest satisfiers. They're really giving guests what they want. Yeah, I think I've mentioned on this podcast before that when I went for the very first time as a little kid, my parents loved every ounce of Epcot, and I was just like, oh my gosh, can we get through these shops and countries a little faster, please, and get
really?
back to
Are you kidding me? Epcot was probably the most important thing on my first visit.
Oh, okay.
It blew my little kid brain. I couldn't believe it because I was just walking, and I was walking through all these countries, and it was probably the first time that I'd ever been in a fully immersive experience like that. And the fact that you can just walk from one country to another back to back, and it's just such a drastic immersion, it just blew my little mind. And I'll never forget that feeling. That's the one that I always go back to first.
That was the same back home. Whenever I used to, as a little boy, thinking, oh my gosh, I'd love to go to Disney, love to do all this stuff. It wasn't really because of the rides. It was because Epcot, everyone said, oh my gosh, there's stuff from all around the world there, all these different pavilions, and they have food from all around the world there. And, when you're growing up in England, eating like boiled vegetables and, like overcooked roast dinners, like almost every night of the week, and Yorkshire puddings and stuff, when someone says to you, like, oh yeah, it's a little bit exotic, it's a little bit continental, you're like, oh my God, really? There's a place that does that all under one roof? Yep, I'm there. Please take me now. So I totally get the Epcot thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it just seems like with, like Lou was talking about, like you were mentioning, that we mentioned it evolving into Nemo, and then there's the Ratatouille element coming. I mean, I just got the impression with all these new changes that a lot of the changes they're making to Epcot, at least to me, maybe I'm looking at it through my one-dimensional minded kid's mind when I went to that first one, but I was getting the impression that that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to, by theming it and applying some of those pop culture elements a little more into Epcot, kind of like they are at the other parks, without, like you were saying, losing what Epcot is, where you're learning about the different countries, you're getting to eat all the different foods and everything. But it did seem to me like that maybe that was one of the reasons why some of the pop culture stuff was beginning to work its way into Epcot, was maybe to make it a little more interesting to kids and adults.
Yeah, and look, for those people who, are screaming that, Walt would be rolling over in his grave, I'm not so sure that he would be, right? Well, again, Disneyland was created, especially, I keep going back to Fantasyland, it was completely based on IP, right? I mean, he was not, he understands what was going to get people into the parks, and he also understood that, like we need to, Disney is in the business of making money, and the way to do that is by satisfying guests and keeping guests in the parks and spending money. And look, World Showcase was not necessarily the most exciting thing for maybe a 4, 5, 6-year-old, 7, 50-year-old kid to do. Now all of a sudden it's changing, but I still think has not lost its original intent. And I think even in fact, it's going to start embracing that even more.
Yeah, and I was wondering what you heard. I'm sure you've heard everything from, rumors to things that may actually be true somewhere down the road. But it seems like one of the things that they're still trying to figure out, and we discussed on the show recently that this might be a Bob Iger thing as well, as to how much the Muppets are actually involved in the park. I mean, for years and years, they've had the same show that was made in the 70s, right before Jim Henson passed away, with Muppets 3D. And I know they've had a couple of things here and there that have popped up, but for the most part, their presence has been in Hollywood studios. And then finally, they did the thing in Magic Kingdom where they tell the story of the Declaration of Independence, which I thought was really, really cool. But it seems like they're still trying to figure out what to do. And one of the most recent things I've heard is maybe a presence in Epcot, maybe moving the Muppets to Epcot. I know Sam the Eagle is now the owner, I guess, of the barbecue place and the portion of America. But I've even heard things ranging from maybe infusing it into things related to Figment, and maybe Figment, they say, is actually a Muppet or something like that. I mean, have you heard some of those things as well as to how they're trying to figure out how to incorporate the Muppets a little more into the parks?
The Muppets are interesting because every few years, the Muppets sort of rear their heads again. If you think back to the late 80s, early 90s, there were plans, and there was even signage and walls up saying that Muppet Studios was coming soon, which was going to be sort of this mini land by the streets of America. So after Muppet 3D was sort of going to be the cornerstone attraction, obviously you said after Henson died, everything sort of fell apart. But there was going to be the Swedish chef was going to have like a video cooking school, and there was going to be the Great Gonzo's Pandemonium Pizza Parlor. Like there was going to be a lot of cool Muppet stuff. And then a few years ago, remember, there was the new version of the Muppet movie, and then the sequel. Yep. We're like, oh, this is it. Here again. Not that this is going to be it. Here come the Muppets once again, and we almost were getting this sense, or some of us nostalgic were getting this excitement that the Muppets were going to be resurrected again. And I still can't identify why they have not had a more pronounced presence in the parks. I really thought Hollywood Studios was going to be their home. Yeah. Especially, look, Muppet Vision 3D has really remained the same for decades and still draws a crowd. There's a lot of people who are still seeing it for the very first time, and the jokes are like they're still landing. Bean Bunny is like hysterical to a lot of people. So, why not leverage that? And I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer. They may have, done surveys, or again, the Muppet TV show did not do as well as expected. I thought it was a really interesting sort of presentation of it, sort of again like the Muppet TV show did back in the 70s. It sort of towed that line between stuff for kids, but also a few in-jokes that adults could get as well.
Yeah.
But obviously did not maybe land the way they had hoped.
I know all of us here, we're all big Star Wars fans too, and that's definitely something that, especially once Disney officially bought Lucasfilm, everything just got bigger and bigger. But I remember even before that, I mean, as a kid that looked forward to going to riding Star Tours over and over again, I have to say, I would do it because I had to do it. I'm a Star Wars fan, but I always did wonder in the back of my mind, could they ever do something different? I remember I was there at the park when they had the Last Trip to Endor event, where you could ride the old version one more time before it went under construction. And I love everything they've done to Star Tours. And then now we have Star Wars Land, or Galaxy's Edge. And then, of course, here very soon we're going to have that hotel that's a starship. And that experience, I mean, that really is kind of the pinnacle of immersion now, I would say, wouldn't you, that not only getting to ride things, but I mean, they are trying to literally drop you in there, and now they're going to put you in space and then take you there as far as a full immersion into a property. I mean, I don't think it really gets much bigger or better than that.
Yeah, Star Wars, too, like Muppets, has been an interesting animal, going from the early days of Star Tours and early ideas to bring Star Wars into the parks. I just interviewed Dan Cockrell on my show, who shared some stories about what this first iteration of Star Wars Land was going to be, and how, that plane was very much in flight, sort of bringing, Tatooine really to life, and then Kathleen Kennedy pulling the plug and saying, no, look, we have new stories to tell, and we want to make it something that's going to appeal to multiple generations. It makes total sense, right? Because it's not a matter of telling the stories on Tatooine. It's for us to live our own adventures, right? Yeah. We want that idea of the unexpected, and like I said, sort of almost choosing your own ending and being able to interact in a world and with characters to take home these very unique, very personalized, which I think is going to continue to happen, very personalized stories of our own. And now with the Star Wars Hotel and, things I think we're all starting to hear about just how deeply immersive. I mean, we sort of overuse that word, but this is going to be a game changer in terms of levels of immersion. And I think there's going to be a lot of surprises in store that for things that we have not seen, not just from a technology perspective, but from a storytelling perspective, beyond just being able to put on Jedi robes and wield lightsabers, inside the hotel, but really sort of bringing those stories to life. And, for us as guests, being able to bring those stories home and share them with others. Just open the doors, tell us how much it costs, and, let's get on it.
Exactly. Well, I'm already saving up.
Well, and to that point, I've actually joked, Lou, I thought that, once this thing opens, getting reservations at that place is almost trying to get tickets to Lambeau Field. Your name's going to be on a long waiting list to get on that thing. I hope I'm wrong about that, but
I think you're right. And, we don't, we're speculating again as to what it's going to cost. And people are just saying, I don't care. Like it's not going to matter to a certain degree, because the demand, I think, is going to be so very high for this, cruise-like experience in this hotel for a couple of days.
And I would say to all of our listeners, if you haven't already checked out Lou's work, Lou has some fantastic access. He knows everyone who there is to know in that sort of parks organization. Obviously must be the foremost authority on Disney parks, and certainly broadcasting as well. Was it WDW Radio.com? I was interested though, because you were saying on there how there was a pivot from Kathleen Kennedy to do the whole Batuu thing rather than Tatooine. And, you know, I know there's a certain amount of synergy there with the new stories and obviously trying to kind of have their own properties and shore up what's going on with that back half of the trilogy and all of that, or the 9 movies, I should say, the latter trilogy. I did hear from some of the people who enjoy your content on forums and such that might not have been Bob Chapek's desire originally, that they kind of caved to Kathleen Kennedy and kind of gave her a bit of rope there. And maybe in hindsight, they wish they hadn't. Is that borne out by your discussions with the people that you know, that, they wish they kind of had maybe gone with their original impulse on that? Or are they kind of happy with the way that was going?
So I look, again, I don't know anything, right? But we take a very, objective 30,000-foot view. I think if we look at the lines out front and we can only guess what the revenue must be, I have to assume they're really happy with how things are going with Galaxy's Edge. I've spoken to people and I'm sure there were some people who worked on the original project that probably were disappointed because they were so far along in development. But I have to say, again, as a Star Wars fan and as a parent of kids who are 16 and 14 who did not grow up on the original trilogy, they would not, and they do not have any type of emotional connection to that. So I have to say, I actually think it was brilliant and maybe even brave. And again, I'm playing pure devil's advocate here to do that, to say, look, we're going to scrap the quote unquote easy idea of leveraging what we have in terms of all these stories and creating something that's a blank canvas where you can walk into Galaxy's Edge tomorrow having never seen a Star Wars film and have an amazing time. Why? Because you don't need to have a frame of reference. If it was based on Tatooine and the original trilogy, my kids would have no idea what's going on. You'd have all these uber nerds, and I'm raising my hand, going, oh, look, that's from, remember when Alec Guinness did this with R2D2? And then there would be a disconnect for the people who did not know it and who did not get it. So I understand, and I can understand how it might have been a hard thing to convince, but I think hindsight being 2020, I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the only thing that people who grew up with the prequel trilogy, the only thing they think about with Tatooine is it's full of sand and sand gets everywhere.
but there's beautiful nods to the original trilogy, to me is, and when you find them, they're treasures. They're such wonderful surprises. You're like, oh, I get that. I get why there's this creature in the water by the water fountain, because that's what Luke encountered, and then we can nerd out.
That's so true, because that's what we did. Because I remember I went to Galaxy's Edge for the first time in November, and Jen had to run to the restroom, so I just was sitting there, and then I was sitting right next to that thing, and then sure enough, that eyeball pops up, and that's exactly what I said. I was like, oh, look at that. That's that thing from the trash compactor. And I said, Jen, you got to watch this eyeball pop out of this water.
Right, because it lets the nerds go, oh, my God, it's a Dianoga from episode 4, and they get all. But if you would have sort of framed it in you have to sort of know this, there would, my daughter was like, what is the thing in the water fountain? So,
that's a good point.
It serves both masters, I think.
Well, I have to ask you, when I was there, they had not opened Rise of the Resistance yet. So we did get to do the Millennium Falcon and, look around and do everything. But I know you've had a chance to experience Rise of the Resistance. For those who are wondering what that experience is like, what was that like for you when you got to experience that for the first time? Because I know the anticipation had to be sky high, and then next thing you know, you're on it.
Yeah, so I went in really, I don't like to watch any videos. I like to see things with my own eyes. Yes. I don't want to know all the details because I want that element of surprise. And I'm not going to lie to you. And again, to be perfectly transparent, I was able to attend a media preview. So I did have the blessing and luxury of being able to ride it a number of times before going back with guests. I'm not going to lie, man. The first time I rode it, there was this wet, salty discharge streaming down my face. I did. I cried because it did exactly what it touched on those emotional elements that brought me back to seeing the movie for the first time in the theater with my dad in 1977. And then I cried again that following Saturday when I brought my son and I was watching his face just light up. I did. I'm even getting choked up now. Jesus.
That's okay. Go for it. We all do that.
But I mean, that's, and look, I think that's why that's why we podcast about Disney, right? Because we love it so much because we have that emotional connections. And when they can bring that to life and have these evocative moments in a theme park attraction, there's nothing better.
That's awesome. In fact, there are times where, when we get to do experiences like that, whether it's watching, one of the movies for the first time or going back to see them again in the theater or an experience like that, occasionally I will catch my wife looking at me to see if I'm tearing up yet.
Because she knows.
Yeah. She's like, oh, I bet he's going to tear up here. I just know it. There goes the music. Oh, yeah, he's gone.
So something I've been thinking about, because I watched a tour around Magic Kingdom that you did on a YouTube channel called Travel with Rick, and it was probably about a 40-minute video, and the level of detail you go into about, just the various things the park does, and how, things I never had heard about or noticed, like, the way the layout is designed to give sneak previews, everything is situated to give a glimpse of what's to come. Does it just kind of drive you nuts that there's so much detail and magic and layers that people are just never going to know about? Or is that just kind of what fuels your passion to do what you do? Because I feel like with that knowledge, it would drive me insane.
No, it's actually the opposite, right? It fuels the passion because I think Walt Disney World and the Disney theme parks are, I was going to say layers of the onion, but we'll say leaving layers of a cake, right? And as you can still enjoy it just on a very relative superficial level where you go in and you take in the sounds and the attractions and the shows and the food and the snacks and the food and food and food. But you can also, as you continue, look, I earned this body, right? I worked for it. So the more you go back and you get to want to learn more, it's amazing as you start to peel back the layers and you continue to have all of these aha moments. Like, that's the joy, right? That's the beauty in is somebody going back and saying, you know what? I've been to Magic Kingdom 100 times. I've seen it all. I've done it all. And either Disney or on their own, or if I can help somebody find something new and connect the dots and realize that this thing is there for a reason and to tell a story and let them sort of dig a little deeper, and all of a sudden their eyes widen and there's a new level of enjoyment and appreciation. It's exactly the reason why I do what I do.
Oh, beautiful.
That's awesome.
I'm just going to piggyback off of Regina's and just say, Lou, what's your favorite hidden Mickey?
Oh. So, I usually leave the hidden Mickeys to the experts like Steve Barrett and the guys that, they go out and they hunt them all the time. Some of my favorite hidden Mickeys aren't hidden Mickeys, like you go to Animal Kingdom and there's a hidden Jafar on Kilimanjaro Safaris, or the ones that aren't technically hidden Mickeys. So like in the Haunted Mansion, I always look to see in the ballroom scene, there's the plates on the table that are technically not official. So the cast members will make it into a hidden Mickey, and then when Imagineering goes in to check on the ride, they make him not a hidden Mickey, and then the cast members put him back to a hidden Mickey again. So, watching it sort of come and go is always fun too.
Smashing. Love
That's
it.
awesome. We've already touched on some of the great content that Lou has been putting out there for fans of all ages over the years. And we know that we can obviously get all that through his podcast and WDWRadio.com, but also so many of the other great things that Lou is involved in is at LouMongello.com. And it's been great to see all the content that you're still finding a way to provide, Lou, even though we're in these unusual times like we talked about in the beginning. Are there some things that you've recently done or that you have coming up that you want people to know about so they can be going out there and finding some of that Disney content while we wait for the parks to open back up?
No, and I appreciate you touching on all the things that I do. And, for years, I've really tried to make my podcast as evergreen as possible. So you can go back and listen to old shows, and they're still relatively timeless and relevant. And I also do live video on Facebook every Wednesday night, so we can talk about some of the things in a two-way conversation about some of the fun stuff that's going on. So, yeah, like you said, WDWRadio.com is where you can find everything, and I'm at LouMongello.com and at Lou Mongello on all the social.
Easy to remember, and of course just easy to remember what you talk about a lot, which is Disney, and we're all passionate about that here too. So that never gets old, and you never get tired of talking about it, and I think that was proof today. Well, Lou, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today on the Disney Plus Streamcast, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
No, thank you, Scott, Nathan, Regina. I appreciate you guys inviting me and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Lou.
Thanks, Lou.
Keep up the great work and stay safe.
Thanks, you too.
And that's going to wrap up this episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back next week with a new episode. And because we didn't have the advantage, I guess, of having a show come out on Star Wars Day, we are going to dedicate the next show to Star Wars, just to kind of make up for it. As many of you know, The Empire Strikes Back celebrated its 40th anniversary this year as part of Star Wars Day. So we're going to talk about that next week, but we're also going to talk about the first episode of the Mandalorian documentary series. Remember, we are on Twitter at Disney Plus Cast and online at DisneyPlusStreamcast.com. You can find episodes there. You can reach out to us if you want to. And we also try to keep you up to date with what's coming in future shows. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to having you back next week for another episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast.